realistic is it to throw a knife
in a sword fight?
Hi-ya!
Ow!
Before we try and throw things at each other, let's talk about knife throwing in general.
We aren't knife throwing experts, but we have a basic understanding.
There are three main types of spin. There's full spin, where you throw the knife, it does a full rotation and it hits.
There's half spin, where you hold it by the blade and it will spin half a time before making impact.
And then there's no spin, where you throw it and it doesn't spin at all, but flies like a javelin.
Of these three techniques, no spin is the only really viable option.
Full spin needs to be at a certain range so the knife will fully rotate and hit with the tip first. If you're too close or too far, it'll hit with the wrong side.
You can get good enough at knowing your range to know the appropriate range to be at, but when your opponent is chasing after you, it's not a very realistic expectation.
Half spin is a little bit easier because you can adjust your hand position to compensate for how far your target is. The lower down your hand is, the quicker the spin, so the closer the target, and the farther up your hand is, the longer the spin for a farther away target.
But this runs into the same issue of that even if you know the perfect distance and can adjust accordingly, the other person is just charging you down the entire time.
No spin is the best option because you can throw this and it'll sail and hit with the tip no matter what distance the target's at.
That said, this is also the hardest way to throw a knife.
So we're gonna do a little bit of an experiment and we're gonna assume that we are the best knife throwers in the world and see if it's viable to throw a knife during a sword fight. But before we even start, there's a problem. I'm a right-handed fencer and I'm also a right-handed knife thrower.
So for this test, we're just gonna cheat.
We're just gonna swap hands and pretend.
It's really terrifying. Ah, in the leg.
Oh my God. The knife distracted me from real sword fighting. You're actually parrying them pretty well.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard to parry them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're distracted. You're distracted.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So the results.
Very effective.
This actually worked really well. There was a couple of caveats. We assumed that every time I hit, it would have been point on. I'm not the best knife thrower in the world, but we were assuming that I was. But even still, that might be unrealistic.
We also assumed that every shot would have stopped me, which is also a pretty big ask.
Even if I had gotten him somewhere in the stomach, he probably could still come at me, but I do have the set the sword to defend myself afterwards. Here are the tactics that I found to be really useful. I could go ahead and I could feint the throw, making him move, and then I could throw again after he tried to parry.
The best tactic that I found to counter it was staying at a range where I could still bait a throw and parry and rush in immediately before he had a chance to draw and throw his second one.
But once I realized he was doing that, it was really easy to confuse him with my feint or to feint and hit with my sword. He was so focused on this knife that I actually creeped into distance once and just reached out and touched him. So I'm actually pretty impressed that knife throwing was that effective, but there was another thing that was pretty impressive to me, and that was you parried a lot of knives.
Yeah, it was surprisingly doable, which raises the question.
How easy would it be to parry a knife?
With the sword.
Let's find out.
Ow.
Mother trucker, dude.
Today, I'm gonna be throwing knives at Clark.
And I'm gonna be parrying knives.
For this video, Clark's not gonna try and attack me. He's just focused on defending himself from these knives. Did you get hit?
It flew over to the arm.
Okay.
I think I'll count that as parry.
Parried. We should switch sides.
Nope.
Face. Yeah. You parried that one, yeah. That was pretty good.
Nope. Actually, no. Okay. That one, you think just missed. Ah. Ah. Speed helps more.
After we started throwing knives all over our studio, we remembered that we built a thing for this.
We're smart. That one hit. That one also hit. Hit. Miss. Miss.
Miss. So this is actually really interesting.
The difference between able to parry a knife and not being able to was about one step.
I found that I had a much higher percentage of hitting when I was closer because it was too fast for him to react to. But if I was a little bit further away, he did have time and he parried quite a few knives.
It was also interesting, if you were targeting the head chest area, it was a lot easier to parry than when you were going for like the arms or the stomach torso area.
I'm not the best knife thrower. Not all of these hit with the tip forward. We're not trying to see if that's the case. But what I did find is that I could feint, get him to do something, and then come at a different angle or come at a low angle. And a lot of those times it was harder for you to get them.
So while it was surprisingly doable, it's by no means easy. Another interesting point is you have multiple knives. I can parry one, maybe two, but can I parry 3 or 4?
People who are actually good at this can fire off 1, 2, 3 knives in rapid succession, and just no. Knives continue to be actually a pretty viable combat tactic. Now I just gotta learn how to do it left-handed.
Stop it. Get some help.
How effective would throwing knives be
Against a sword.
if I only had knives and no sword to defend myself?
Let's find out.
So for this experiment, I'm gonna be throwing knives at Clark and he's gonna be closing in on me. If he gets hit, he loses and has to stop. And if he gets to me, I lose. I did get hit.
You got the third one as I hit you.
Yeah. Oh, you're dead.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I died.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
second one did get you.
It
the first one was
winged
the
the
hand.
elbow.
This was a really interesting experiment. Unlike the experiment where I had a sword and knives, I didn't feel as overpowered. In fact, I felt it as a disadvantage.
Yeah, because we've already discovered that pairing a throwing knife with a sword is reasonable to do. In this case, you had one, maybe two chances before I could close and hit you.
Now, if you were further away, I'd have a better chance, but we didn't do that for two reasons. One, it wouldn't fit on the camera, and two, I mean, that's just ranged versus not ranged.
Yeah.
When I had my other sword, you had to stay at bay. I still had a threat, so you couldn't just close on me like with this one. But if you closed on me and I had these, I'm not gonna beat you with a knife against a sword.
No.
There were many a time where I did hit you in the hand. I don't know if that would have stopped you.
There were a couple where I would parry it and it'd keep going to the arm or like the thigh. That probably wouldn't have stopped me, but if it did sink blade first, it could have.
I did hit you a number of times just dead on.
Yes.
A couple of times I hit you dead on the hand, but I would say you probably still came out with more wins than I did.
More wins, but also more wounds. Probably the most surprising thing was how effectively you could ward your entire body with just a nice strong flu as you chase.
Trying to get around the sword was hard. You'd think it's so small it wouldn't be a big deal, but realistically, if I'm throwing at him, it's easy for him just to move the sword and block.
Here, if I go high versus low, I can cover my entire body with a pretty small motion.
So if it came down to a battle between someone with throwing knives and someone with a sword,
The sword wins.
if that person is already within a reasonable distance.
Yeah.
If the throwing knife person has seen them before they're even close to engaging, if they're even out of Sufekten, I might give it to the knife thrower.
Agreed, especially the biggest thing was time. You only really had about 2 chances to throw before I was close enough that the third one was usually a glancing shot and I could hit you.
Are there other thrown objects that would be useful in a sword fight?
Like a chakram.
Clark, that's a frisbee.
Yeah, but we don't have a chakram.
Okay, well, I would rather be hit with that than a sharp chakram. So for this experiment, we're gonna have this be a stand-in.
A chakram is basically a sharpened disc that you can throw. The actual historical designs had a pretty complex shape that would give it lift like a frisbee does, only it was a sharpened steel disc.
So we are gonna see if it's useful in a fight. All right, let's try some silliness. Double, but also I
Yeah.
blocked that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you good?
Yeah, oh.
That
That's your best throw. I'd be dead. I did get hit. Yeah.
So this experiment was a little bit trickier.
I felt like the knives were a little bit more effective. We had similar amount of successful hits, but the knife is a thrust. It's going in, it's going deep, and I was able to feint and do some other stuff that I didn't feel was coming back at me from you.
Feinting with a throwing knife was a lot easier because a feint here is more of a cross body motion and I can access a lot of weird angles that would be harder to parry, but as an actual feint, it's not as fast as you could with the knife.
I also felt like it was better for me to close because with this, it has to have that momentum of throwing. If I'm closer to you, it's less effective, but the knife is still pretty effective up close. So I felt like a tactic of like stuffing you was better than waiting out at distance.
Yeah, because here you have to have an amount of rotation with the arm, if not the arm and hips. So this could probably generate more power, but requires a lot more movement to do that.
And because of the nature of how it hits, it's not gonna penetrate as deeply as a knife was. Now you still got a couple of really good hits. That hit to my throat, that was rough.
I was concerned.
Yeah, ugh.
I think this has a lot of tricky things I can do with it if I practice more.
This was a really fun experiment. It showed that an offhand throwing knife is a pretty good weapon in combat.
And it wasn't even super overpowered. It's possible to parry them.
But there's one crucial flaw with our experiment.
We aren't very good at throwing knives.
No, we are definitely not throwing knife experts.
We need a coach.
Which is why I found us a pro.
Hello, my friends.
Thanks for watching and we hope you liked the video. Stay tuned because we've got some cool stuff coming up. If you like the channel, please consider supporting us on Patreon for as low as $1 a month and go check out sellswordarts.com for even more stuff. Thanks and see you in the next one.